Hey, it's Mark Derrick here from Illegal Argument, and now the headless video blog. Whether this is a video blog, I don't know. I've just been wanting to do a bit more screencasts and video work, so yeah. So here we are. Anyway, recently on the podcast, on Illegal Argument, we've been talking about the Java module system, and this is terrible weather. We've been talking about the module system, and we've not really actually used it, so a lot of it we're talking conjecture based on what we've read and our experiences with OSGI. Now, recently I also mentioned that one of my projects, open source projects, Halbuilder, got some pull requests and some tickets raised to support the module system. Firstly through just the automatic module name, and secondly through actual proper modules. Now, unfortunately, this is against the version 4.x series. Now, we'd actually released 5.x a while ago, which drastically changed the API and dropped the repositories from 5 or 6 different separate repositories down to one single repository. A lot less functionality in that it doesn't support XML anymore in the current version anyway. But in a different shape. Unfortunately, during this migration, I left some of the repositories kind of in a state of flux, because at that point it wasn't clear that it was going to go to a single module, a single bundle, a single repository, and yeah. So these pull requests are now across 5 different modules. Unfortunately, they can't clearly merge against the development branch because of the changes that I had badly done and left in a kind of a broken state, really. So this little video series is going to be just going through cleaning some of that up and applying the pull request changes, probably not actually accepting the pull request themselves, because in part I don't necessarily like the way that they've been done because of things that I've evolved in version 5 and that I'm going to bring back in. Namely things like the tiles plugin and for reusability and composability and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's throwing down with rain here, and let's just go back to the laptop, shall we? Go back indoors where it's much warmer. So stay tuned and we'll get into some code. Okay, so we're back here in the studio room flat, away from the horrible rain and wind outside. It's now a few hours later, and let's take a look at this code, shall we? So we can see here that in the Halbuilder project on GitHub, we've got several repositories. We have some test resources for unit tests, covering different types of REST-style resources that you might encounter, different shapes and different things that happen in the HAL ecosystem of repositories. We have an API artifact which separates out the interfaces from the actual implementations, and this worked out really well for OSGI usage because consuming applications from the client side only need to actually depend on the API. They don't need to bind to implementations, and this will also work out well for modules in Jigsaw. Got the core libraries, you get the picture. So if we look at some of the pull requests that we've got, or at least the contents of the pull request, say for automatic module name, we can see they bump the next version, or just clean up some Git stuff. They also bring in the Maven wrapper to build against the same version of Maven that was used in the last version. I don't think that's actually the responsibility of this change. This is for automatic module names, so the changes here really kind of only want to be for that particular change. We're bumping the compiler plugin, reformatting the POMs, and cleaning up old artifacts. They're all kind of project health kind of things rather than the actual change itself, and I kind of like to keep my pull requests or Gerrit reviews, if possible, isolated to the particular change that we're actually talking about. So that's on the JaxRS module. We can see on the Guava module pretty much the same changes, and on the XML once again we've got the same changes. Same for standard. And then over on the API, I think we've got the same. On the core, this is where things start to get a little bit more hairy. Not exactly what happened with this pull request when it came in, but it seems to have actually included previous commits and bug fixes, my own changes and some releases. Yeah, so don't necessarily want to merge this directly, and the core project itself has actually been moved on to version 5 anyway, so we wouldn't want to apply this into the develop module as we've seen here. So we can't use standard GitHub tooling for this particular pull request. So we're going to have to do this manually regardless of how we actually handle this. As part of Halbuilder 5, I introduced our Maven Tiles project, which is providing mix-in support, so you can have common behavior that you can apply cross-concerns into the project, into the Maven project, similar to mix-ins in Ruby or other languages. Yeah, I could do a video on that later if people are interested in mix-ins and that kind of stuff. Yeah, but let's just dive into some code. Now, because this is a change that's going to be affecting all of these repositories, and I kind of actually want to handle this in one, if possible, in one go. Not necessarily one go, but in one kind of batch, kind of set of changes. Being separate repositories is great for the evolution of the individual items. For something like this, I kind of prefer to work on a composite repository so I can create changes that are affecting the whole set. And a lot of people will say, get submodules, and then go, get submodules. But I use git subrepo, and I find this to be one of the hidden gems in the Git ecosphere. I'll link to it down below. But it works so much nicer. So I'm just going to start with an empty directory, and I've kind of pre-set a lot of this up. So I'm just going to create a new Git repository, give it a README file, and commit and add that. We do this because Git subrepo requires you to not have an empty repository before it starts doing its whiz-bangness. Now if I clone all of those repos using Git subrepo into this project, and we can start hitting some code. Let's have a look here. This should be done shortly. Helps to press enter. Now, these support branches that I've created previously for each of the repositories are taken from the last public release of the 4.x series. So they're all inconsistent version numbers, and that's one of the first steps that we want to address. Each of the different pull requests, I mentioned that there was a version change, and that just kind of went to a patch release from, say, 401 to 402. But because we're introducing automatic module name, that's kind of a larger change. So I'm thinking we're just going to stick with version 4.1.1 across the board. So first we'll just create a basic POM file. Where are we? Basic POM, and we'll call you support 4.x 4.11. Cool. And add in the modules, and that's all we'll do here. And we'll open this up in IntelliJ. And if we just build this, whilst we're waiting for IntelliJ to import that, we will see that everything builds, all the tests pass, but we're all on disparate version numbers. Let's see here. And we'll notice this with the final build result from Maven. And as you can see, we've got 403, 402, 407, 402, 402, 407. Yeah, so first things first, we're going to go through and change all those version numbers. I'm just going to find all the POMs and use the Codehouse Versions plugin to set those version numbers. Now, also, one of the things that was in all of those pull requests, there were reformatting POMs, changing the compiler version, and a bunch of health kind of things, project health. Now, in the 5.x series, I used the Maven Tiles plugin, which we also developed, which I mentioned before, to implement a Halbuilder style tile, which contains standard build compiler versions, introducing error-prone, null away from Uber as part of error-prone for code checks, check style, Google formatter for automatically reformatting code in a consistent manner, which is contentious. Some people like it, some people don't, but it means everything is being formatted to a consistent set of rules. Programmatic rules, so they're not always what we as humans would agree on or think we agree on. But this means that pull requests should always be kind of consistent and stuff, which is a much better thing, in my opinion, than quibbling over minor formatting issues. Yes, so now that that's done, if we just rebuild this, we should see that everything builds against as 4.1.1. And as it does, we've got one version number, 4.1.1 snapshot, and no version numbers mentioned against the individual artifacts. Now, before we dive into some further things, I'm just going to show you the repositories. And so we've added our base README, and then every time we did a Git subrepo clone, we got an individual commit for each of those different clones, and we can see that the commit message contains all the details about where it was cloned into, where it was cloned from, the shards of those commits, and all that kind of stuff. That's in the commit message. We also have this in a .git repo file in each of the directories, which is more of a Git style configuration file, which just pretty much has that same information. And these things are utilized when you start getting into doing Git subrepo push, pull, and contributing back to upstream repositories and pulling in further changes. We can see here we've got our version number change, so changing all the version numbers. and also aligning our dependencies also to that same version number so that we are building against the exact same code that we've just built, which is great. And while we're here, we'll just commit these changes. Oh, we missed one. We will definitely need to be adding a git ignore here. So aligned version numbers added. Now I'm not going to mention the base project because when we start pushing these up to upstream, that message won't really be relevant. So we might actually remove that from this commit. So align version number 24. Whoa. Okay, I think there's a bug in git sub in lazy git. Yeah, okay, we're not going to use lazy git. So they've all been added. So git commit message. Aligned version number to 4.1.1 snapshot. Added base pom. Whoa, okay, maybe it wasn't lazy git, maybe it's something else that's... Yep, that's definitely a I think that's keyboard maestro. That'll do us. Okay. So now we've got our project over here. Let's start making some changes. So we open up the POM. Now, so we've got the compiler plugin that we've previously mentioned. If we include the style tile and remove the compiler plugin, so the style tile that we've got here, just a brief overview of Maven tiles. You declare the project, the plugin, and define a set of tiles that will be injected into the dependency hierarchy, the project hierarchy. So each tile gets injected as a new parent to your project. And this particular tile contains the Maven compiler plugin as well as other changes and other things I mentioned before. So we don't want to have a duplicate compiler plugin because then things get really confused. So if we build our project now, we should hit upon the first set of code change issues related to this. Let's see, I think, yes, so null away is telling us that we've got some things that are potentially null. So if we look at the null link class, what are we saying on line 26? So 26 here, this constructor, it's telling us that name, title, hreflang, and profile are not initialized. So if things come through this constructor, then they're going to be null. And we haven't said that these are nullable, so that's kind of, it's saying, yeah, no, don't do this. This is kind of horrible. You're introducing potential null pointer issues here. So if we just add some code here, so name, default to that, to empty, name, title, this.hreflang. If we rebuild, then things should be hunky-dory and we should move on to the next set of issues. Right, so now check style has given us some issues, saying that our reader representation is missing some Java comments for deprecations and has some redundant final modifiers. We've got code that we don't actually need to have, and so removing that, less code, better code. So let's go down to line 148. Deprecated. Okay, so we've got here, we can see deprecated content type and flags. And we've got another one which is just content type without flags. Okay, so we'll just say use the version without flags. Okay, that's kind of trivial. This one we want to get rid of our final, that's no longer needed. Final, it's not needed. Deprecated. Use the version without flags. Okay, let's see what we've got now. I find having more of these static analysis checks really good for your project. It can be a pain when you first introduce them or introduce a change, but then it starts keeping things cleaner over time. Pull requests start needing to have actually passed the check style code changes, so you're less going to be fighting over inconsistent trivial things. If we know that we're always reformatting the code on compile, then pull requests are going to match. They're going to match, and if they didn't, then if I committed, then I would be changing the format back anyway. So that's less of things to worry about. Yeah, so it turns out that I was biting off a little bit more than we could chew for one video. One of the problems, as we mentioned before, of adding in check style and nullness checking and formatting issues and that kind of stuff, initially you will get quite a few build breakages, and yeah, so it turns out that we had quite a few build breakages, so we'll just speed through all the rest of this code changes, and this actually went on until the wee hours of the morning, or at least a couple of hours to make all these changes. You can check them in the code repository, but I think this will do for this first episode, this first video. Yeah, and the next one we'll actually be adding in the basics of the tile to do some modularity, automatic module names, and some tests to try and prove that this is actually doing what we expect it to. So, see you in the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and smash that bell, or whatever.